6. Everyone needs more of it. All right. So, okay. So let me talk about 6. That's actually a very important subject. So everyone's familiar with the energy centers. And you're familiar that your top center, these are the major centers. The top center is your Z, which is responsible primarily for your psychic abilities, but also for your communicating abilities with Elohim. Is also from your Z. So that's a very important center. And then at the other opposite end, you have your Vms. Now, the interesting thing about the Vm is the only energy center that actually has 2 components, Vm1 and Vm2. So Vm1 is your sexual center. So anything that has to do with sex is in the Vm1. Vm2 is the creative center. So if you're an artist or a musician or a dancer, anything that you have to create something, or maybe you're just you manufacture products and you have to figure out how to do that. So any creative process, that process, of course, works in your car. Your brain has to think about how to do that, but it's stimulated by your Vm2. And so why do you have Vm1 and you have Vm2? First of all, what's the importance of the Vm in the first place? Well, the psychic center and your Vim center, being they are the bookends of all the other energy centers in between, they're extremely important. And yet they are 2 most often out of whack energy centers in most people. So if you look at the health of the various energy centers in your body, and you say, okay, well, here's my heart center, here's my quo center, here's my physical center, and you look at the health of those, in almost most every person, those are going to be more healthy than their Vim or their Z. Why? Well, let's look at the Z. The Z is primarily for communicating with higher beings, higher sources, particularly Elohim, but any kind of higher being. If you're talking to me, you're using your Z. And any of your psychic abilities. So you have all these great abilities, but most people never ever use even a 1/1000th of 1% of those abilities. They wish they did. They wish they had them. They see movies about them. They say, oh, I want to be able to do that, but they never make it happen. Well, why is that? The desire is there, but why does it never happen? Well, in order for that type of thing to happen in the Z, you have to have activity in the Vim. Those are resonant energy centers. So let's go back, and we're going to go back to the Z in a minute, but let's go back to the Vim. So the Vim1 and Vim2, you have basically, this is a blessing. You have 2 ways to stimulate your Vim energy center and make it expand and grow and spin faster, which in turn is going to affect all the energy centers in between, but particularly the other bookend, the Z center, is also going to start spinning faster and bigger and expand because of the Vim. And it works the opposite way too, if you did the same thing with the Z. But it's a lot easier to do it through the Vim than it is to do through the Z in reverse. All right. So you are blessed here because for one reason or another, a lot of people are sexually repressed. Now, I should tell you that among Celestines, there's not a lot of sexual repression. People think about, oh, Celestines on religious type of things, and so they must be all like prudes or prunes. And that's just the opposite of the case. A lot of sexual activity in the Celestine kingdom, but the reason for that is it is a creative energy. There's also a lot of artistic things that occur in the Celestine kingdom because it is a creative energy of the Vim, and that's a very important energy. You have a choice. You have a choice. Do you want to stimulate your Vim sexually, or do you want to stimulate your Vim through creative expression? Or do you want to do both? Because you can do both as well. But if for some reason you're in a place in your life that you don't have sex with anyone else or with yourself, and it's just kind of a dead energy center for you for that, well, that's all right, because you can still go to the creative aspect and you can start, well, what can I do that's creative, that's actually making me think about being creative, whether it's, am I doing a piece of art, am I painting a picture, doing a drawing, doing a sculpture, or am I writing a piece of music, a musical scar, or am I designing a shed, and I have to decide how to do this shed. I want to build this shed, and I need to this part needs to be this size, and that part needs to be that size, and this part needs to be this piece of lumber, and I'm going to need these type of fastening materials. That's a creative expression as well. It doesn't have to be an artistic creative expression. Anything that makes you think about creating something that didn't exist before, from a shed to a musical scar to a dance routine to a piece of artwork that you're drawing, that's all creative expression. It's all part of your Vim. So if you stimulate your Vim through either Vm1 or Vm2, that's a very, very good thing. I want you to look at your lives right now, your life right now. Are you stimulating your Vim, either Vm1 or Vm2? If you're not doing it in a very everyday way, and I don't mean once a week, I mean every single day, you're stimulating Vm1 or Vm2 or both of them one way or the other, then you need to do that. It'll make a huge difference in your capacity of your Z and the activity of all your other energy centers. So this is a very great piece of advice. I please ask you not to ignore it. Look at your life and realistically and say, are you in a place that you can increase Vm1? Or are you in a place that you can increase Vm2 activities? So for instance, if you're increasing Vm2 activities, then you're looking at what can you do that's a creative force, that you're creating something that didn't exist before. I've gone through all of the type of things as examples, so you know what I'm talking about. So even if you think, well, I am not a creative person, I can't do art, I can't do that, I can't write music, I can't, you can, just start. Even if you think you've never done any of those things before, maybe you think you're a terrible artist, you can't draw anything, start, try it, practice, create something. Even if you draw, scribble, there's a flower, okay, well, there's the stem, there's the petals that are there, there's the middle, there's some leaves. You just created something from nothing, all right? So now make a whole garden, draw the whole garden. So do it, start, and don't prejudge yourself saying you can't do something. And with Vim1, it's the same. Don't prejudge yourself saying you can't do this sexually or can't do that sexually. There's no can't do's. As long as you're not hurting yourself or hurting someone else, anything else you choose to do in Vim1 is fine, as long as it's not taking you down a bad path. And there is a tightrope there. I'll talk about that in a moment. But on the creative side, Vim2, please try it. Even if you think you're not creative, start, draw something simple like a flower and go from there. Vim1. All right, there's a tremendous amount of sexual repression in this world, especially among religious people. It's sad because that sexual repression, it affects all the life. Now, you may be by yourself. You may be with a partner that you don't have sexual relations with anymore. If that's the case, that's not something to cry about. You always can have sex with yourself. There's nothing wrong with that. And so please don't be sexually repressed and say, oh, well, I can't do that. You know, yes, you can. If you need to have some kind of sexual expression or creative, I shouldn't say you need to have sexual, because you can have Vim2 and you can totally ignore your Vim1 if you want. That's your choice. But what I just want you to know is that there's nothing wrong with not ignoring your Vim1. There's nothing wrong with having some sexual intimacy with someone that you love. There's nothing wrong with, if you don't have that person available, having some sexual intimacy with yourself to have some sexual expression and release. Where the problem arises is that if you're doing anything to self-express your sexuality, the problem only arises if you're doing something that's hurting yourself, hurting someone else. Or so, for instance, let's take pornography. Pornography is something that can be all right to work with. It's all right if you have something that you're watching, something that's pornographic, that's stimulating you, as long as what you're watching is not demeaning to the people who made it. So for instance, if you're watching some type of bondage movie, that's not a good thing. Even if the people say, oh, well, I'm a willing participant. Well, no, you're demeaning someone in that activity. You're putting them down or hurting them. Those are not good things. And so the problem arises, it's not that pornography itself is a bad thing. That can be a very stimulating thing, But it's very easy to go down a darker and darker path with that and end up having it be a bad thing. So if you use anything like that for stimulation of your mental thoughts and processes, that's not bad in itself unless you allow it to go down paths that are not respectful of the people that are the actors in the show, if you will. All right, so I talked about that subject enough.
I think so.
All right.
Yeah.
Hope I didn't scare everyone away.
No, I doubt you did.
No.